Karen Patterson thought she had all the power in the world. As president of Meadowbrook HOA, she terrorized residents for years with her petty rules and vindictive enforcement. Then she made the mistake of targeting my family. She drove us into near bankruptcy, had my wife's service dog removed, and called the police on my disabled son for playing in his own backyard. But Karen made one fatal, unforgivable error that would cost her everything. She never bothered to ask what I did before I retired. Now, sitting in this courtroom, she's about to find out the hard way. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below telling me which country you're from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more amazing real-life stories just like this one. The fluorescent lights in courtroom 9A hummed their constant, monotonous tune as I sat quietly in the back row. My baseball cap was pulled low over my face. Dark sunglasses hid the calculated intensity that had become second nature over 30 years of service. Nobody in that courtroom recognized me. That was exactly how I wanted it, at least for now. My wife, Jennifer, sat 4 rows ahead, her service dog, Bailey, resting quietly at her feet. Even from behind, I could see the tension in her shoulders. Courtrooms triggered her PTSD. At just 34 years old, Jennifer had already survived 2 tours in Afghanistan as an Army medic. The IED that ended her military career had left her with a traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, and anxiety that sometimes made it hard for her to leave the house. Bailey wasn't just a pet. Bailey was her lifeline to normalcy. Next to Jennifer sat our 12-year-old son, Marcus. He was in his wheelchair, positioned carefully in the accessible seating area. Cerebral palsy had affected his legs since birth, but it hadn't touched his brilliant mind or his infectious laugh. At least, not until Karen Patterson had done her best to crush his spirit completely. I watched as Karen Patterson entered the courtroom like a queen surveying her peasants. She wore an expensive designer suit, every blonde hair perfectly sprayed into place. That expression on her face, that self-righteous sneer I had come to know so well, was firmly in place. She carried her ever-present HOA binder, stuffed with violation notices, rules, and documentation of every petty grievance she'd collected over the years. She walked right past Jennifer and Marcus without even a glance, her high heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision. Karen had absolutely no idea who I was. To her, I was just another random face in the crowd, another observer there to watch the proceedings. She didn't know that for 30 years, I had served in the U.S. military, rising to the rank of colonel in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. She didn't know that I had spent 3 decades as a military prosecutor and defense attorney, handling everything from minor infractions to court-martial cases involving war crimes. She didn't know that I had tried over 200 cases and had a conviction rate of 87%. And she definitely didn't know what she had done to my family, or what I had done in response. 14 months ago, we had been so excited about the house in Meadowbrook Estates. After I retired from the military and Jennifer's medical discharge, we wanted a fresh start. A place where Marcus could have a big backyard to play in, a quiet neighborhood where Jennifer could heal, a community where we could finally just be a normal family. The house was perfect. Single story for Marcus's wheelchair accessibility, large backyard with mature trees, quiet cul-de-sac with minimal traffic. And the HOA seemed reasonable when we read the bylaws before purchasing. Standard stuff. Keep your lawn maintained, no offensive decorations, quiet hours after 10 p.m. "Dad, this is amazing," Marcus had said when we first toured the property. His eyes had lit up. "Can we get a basketball hoop for the driveway?" "Absolutely, buddy," I'd promised. "And we'll build you a ramp so you can shoot hoops whenever you want." Jennifer had loved the garden area. "I can plant vegetables here," she'd said softly. Bailey pressed against her leg. "Gardening helps with my therapy. Dr. Richardson says it's good for my PTSD." We closed on the house in September. We moved in with such hope and optimism. We had no idea we were moving into Karen Patterson's kingdom of cruelty. The problem started within the first week. Karen appeared at our door on a Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand, lips pursed in permanent disapproval. I answered the door, still unpacking boxes. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "Can I help you?" "I'm Karen Patterson, HOA president. I'm here to discuss several violations I've already observed. I hadn't even fully moved in yet." "Violations? Your moving truck was parked in the driveway for 3 days. That's a violation. Moving vehicles are only permitted for 24 hours. That'll be a $150 fine." "I wasn't aware of that rule. I'd be happy to—" Ignorance isn't an excuse. Also, you have boxes visible through your front window. That's a violation of our aesthetic standards. Another $100 fine. I blinked, certain I must have misheard. "You're fining me for having moving boxes visible while I'm actively moving in. The rules apply to everyone equally. I'll need payment within 7 days, or the fines will double." That should have been my first warning sign. But I had spent 30 years in the military dealing with regulations and the chain of command. I understood rules, even seemingly arbitrary ones, so I paid the fines, unpacked quickly, and assumed that would be the end of it. I was so incredibly wrong. Over the next 3 months, Karen found endless reasons to target our family. Each one seemed specifically designed to attack our most vulnerable points. What I didn't realize at the time was that Karen had been running Meadowbrook HOA like her personal fiefdom for nearly 4 years. The previous board had been cooperative, mostly retired folks who trusted her to handle day-to-day operations. They had no idea what she was really doing. Karen had a system. She would identify new residents within days of their arrival, size them up, and decide whether they were her kind of people or potential problems. Wealthy, white, able-bodied families got a welcome basket and a friendly introduction. Everyone else got the clipboard and the violation notices. I learned later from a former board member named Tom Richardson that he'd tried to challenge Karen's enforcement methods 2 years earlier. He'd noticed she was targeting specific families while ignoring identical violations by her friends. When he brought it up at a board meeting, Karen had orchestrated a campaign to remove him from the board. She spread rumors about his finances, his marriage, and his character until he resigned just to make it stop. "I tried to warn people," Tom told me months later, shame in his voice. "But Karen is very good at making herself look like the victim. She'd cry at board meetings, talk about how hard she worked, how ungrateful people were. By the time she was done, anyone who challenged her looked like a bully." That was Karen's real talent. She could weaponize tears and victimhood while simultaneously destroying families. She was a master manipulator who had turned HOA leadership into a tool of oppression. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, in those first few months, I didn't know any of this. I knew that Karen Patterson had it out for my family specifically. First, she went after Marcus. Our son loved being outside. After years of surgeries and physical therapy, he'd finally gotten a wheelchair that gave him real independence. We'd built him a small ramp to the backyard, and he'd spend hours out there, playing with his toy cars, reading books, or just enjoying the sunshine. Karen decided this was unacceptable. "Your son is creating a disturbance," she announced during her 3rd visit to our home. Jennifer had answered the door, Bailey beside her. "I'm sorry. What disturbance?" "He's been outside laughing and talking to himself for over an hour. It's disruptive to the neighborhood's quiet enjoyment." My wife stared at her in disbelief. "He's a 12-year-old boy playing in his own backyard at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. The HOA has a right to enforce reasonable noise ordinances." "He's laughing, Karen. Children laugh. Keep him quiet, or I'll be forced to issue a formal violation. This is your only warning." When Jennifer told me about this conversation that evening, I felt rage building in my chest that I hadn't felt since my combat deployments. "She said what?" I asked carefully, keeping my voice level for Marcus's sake. "She said Marcus is too loud. In his own backyard, in the middle of the afternoon." Marcus looked up from his homework, his face falling. "I was too loud? I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to cause trouble. My heart shattered. My son was apologizing for being a child. You did absolutely nothing wrong, buddy, I said firmly, kneeling beside his wheelchair. You have every right to play in your own yard. Don't you ever apologize for laughing and being happy? But the damage was already done. Marcus started staying inside more, afraid of causing problems. His laughter became quieter, more subdued. I watched my joyful son begin to dim, and I hated Karen Patterson for it. Then she went after Bailey. Jennifer's service dog was immaculately trained. Bailey had gone through 2 years of specialized training to help Jennifer manage her PTSD and anxiety. The dog could sense when Jennifer was about to have a panic attack and would alert her. Bailey could help Jennifer navigate crowds, provide deep pressure therapy during flashbacks, and create a protective barrier in public spaces. Bailey was calm, quiet, and professionally trained. The dog never barked unnecessarily, never approached other people without permission, and was always on a leash or harness when outside. Karen didn't care. Service animals must be approved by the HOA board, Karen announced during her next visit. You didn't request approval before moving in. That's a violation. Service animals are protected under the Fair Housing Act, Jennifer said, her voice shaking slightly. Bailey pressed closer to her leg, sensing her rising anxiety. You can't require approval for a medical necessity. I can require documentation. Provide proof of Bailey's training certification, veterinary records, and a letter from your doctor explaining the medical necessity. You have 14 days. That's private medical information. Then remove the dog within 14 days or face daily fines of $100 per day. Jennifer provided every piece of documentation Karen requested. She got a letter from her psychiatrist, her VA counselor, and Bailey's training organization. She provided vaccination records, training certifications, and behavioral assessments. Karen rejected them all as insufficient. The fines started immediately, $100 per day. Within a week, we owed $700. Within 2 weeks, $1,400. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was weaponizing them to cause maximum financial and emotional damage. Then came the incident with the ramp. We had installed a small, portable ramp from our back door to the patio level so Marcus could get outside independently. It was temporary, removable, and specifically designed for accessibility. Karen decided it violated architectural standards. The ramp wasn't approved by the Architectural Review Committee. It must be removed immediately. It's a medical accessibility device for my disabled son, I said, my patience finally wearing thin. I don't care if it's for the President of the United States. It wasn't approved. Remove it within 48 hours, or face a $500 fine and forced removal. Karen, my son needs that ramp to get outside. It's a reasonable accommodation under federal law. Then you should have submitted the proper paperwork before installation. This is your problem, not mine. I filed the paperwork. It was rejected for insufficient detail. I resubmitted with additional detail, rejected for non-compliant materials. I hired an engineer to certify the ramp's safety, rejected because the Architectural Review Committee meets quarterly, and you missed the deadline. The next meeting wasn't for 2 more months. For 2 months, Marcus couldn't get outside independently. We had to carry him down the steps, which he hated because it made him feel helpless. I watched my son's independence get stolen by an HOA president on a power trip, but Karen Patterson wasn't done. Not even close. The destruction of our family came to a head on a Saturday afternoon in late November. We were hosting a small birthday party for Marcus, just 3 of his friends from school, their parents, and Marcus's grandparents. We had decorations in the backyard, balloons, a banner saying Happy 12th Birthday, and streamers. All the decorations were in the backyard, not visible from the street. Karen showed up 30 minutes into the party, clipboard in hand. "You're having an unauthorized gathering," she announced loudly, standing in our open backyard gate. "It's my son's birthday party," I said, keeping my voice calm despite my rising anger. We have 5 children and 6 adults. Hardly a wild party. Any gathering of more than 6 people requires HOA notification and approval. You didn't file for approval. This party must end immediately." Marcus's friends went silent. My son's face turned red with embarrassment. The other parents looked uncomfortable. "Karen, please, it's his birthday." "Rules are rules. End the party now, or I'm calling the police for trespassing and disturbing the peace." "Trespassing? They're invited guests on my private property. This is an HOA community. Your property is subject to HOA rules. End the party, now." Jennifer stood up, shaking with rage and anxiety. Bailey immediately moved to her side. "Get out of our yard," Jennifer said, her voice low and dangerous. "Right now." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Get out. This is our home, our property, our son's birthday. You have no right to be here, and you have no authority to tell us we can't celebrate our child's birthday." Karen smiled. It was a cold, vindictive smile that I would never forget. "You just made this so much worse for yourselves. I'll see you all at the next HOA meeting, and I'll be recommending your immediate eviction from this community for hostile behavior toward HOA leadership." She turned and left. The party was ruined. Marcus was crying. His friends didn't know what to do. Jennifer was shaking so badly I thought she might collapse. That night, after everyone had left and Marcus was finally asleep, Jennifer broke down completely. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "I survived Afghanistan. I survived an IED that should have killed me. But I can't survive Karen Patterson. She's destroying us, and there's nothing we can do about it." I held my wife as she cried. Bailey pressed between us, and I made a decision. Karen Patterson thought we were helpless. She thought we had no power, no resources, no way to fight back. She had no idea who she was dealing with. You see, in my 30 years as a JAG officer, I'd learned something crucial about bullies. They rely on their victims remaining silent, isolated, and afraid. The moment you shine a light on their behavior, the moment you document and expose their patterns, they crumble. I'd seen it happen in military court dozens of times. Abusive commanders, corrupt supply officers, harassers who thought rank would protect them. They all fell apart when their victims stood together and fought back with evidence. Karen Patterson was about to get a masterclass in military precision applied to civilian justice. But I had to be smart about this. I couldn't just charge in with righteous anger. That's what she'd expect from a military guy: aggression, confrontation, emotion. Instead, I was going to do what I'd done in every successful case I'd ever prosecuted. I was going to build an airtight case, brick by brick, until the evidence was so overwhelming that no judge, no board, no jury could possibly rule in her favor. And I was going to do it quietly, methodically, without Karen having any idea what was coming until it was far too late for her to prepare a defense. That Sunday morning, while my family slept, I began gathering evidence. I started with our own documentation. Every violation notice, every fine, every rejected accommodation request, every interaction with Karen. I organized it all chronologically, professionally, the way I'd organized evidence for court-martial cases for 30 years. Then I did something Karen would never expect. I started knocking on neighbors' doors. "Hi, I'm Colonel James Morrison, retired from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. I'm gathering information about HOA enforcement patterns in this community. Would you be willing to share your experiences?" When people heard Colonel and JAG Corps, they opened up. What I discovered was horrifying. The Chen family had been fined $2,800 for speaking Mandarin too loudly on their own back patio. Karen claimed it violated noise ordinances, but she'd never fined English-speaking families for the exact same behavior. Mrs. Dorothy Washington, an 81-year-old black woman, had received 17 violations in 6 months for things like mailbox slightly faded and walking too slowly to collect mail. She'd lived in the community for 12 years without a single violation until Karen became HOA president. The Rodriguez family had been threatened with foreclosure over $4,600 in fines for having too many vehicles parked in their driveway. They had 3 cars for a family of 5. Multiple white families had 4 or 5 vehicles with 0 violations. Sam Baker, a veteran who'd lost his arm in Iraq, had been fined repeatedly for his lawn not meeting standards. He'd hired a landscaping service to maintain it, but Karen kept rejecting it as insufficient. Sam discovered Karen had never fined families who hired her nephew's landscaping company. I interviewed 23 families over 2 weeks. Every single one had a story of harassment, discrimination, or targeted enforcement. And I noticed a pattern that made my blood run cold. Karen's targets were almost exclusively families with disabilities, minorities, veterans, or anyone she perceived as vulnerable. This wasn't just petty HOA nonsense. This was systematic discrimination, and I knew exactly what to do about it. The more I dug, the uglier it got. I discovered that Karen had a particular hatred for military families. It didn't make sense at first until I talked to Tom Richardson again. Karen's ex-husband was military, Tom explained. Army officer. He left her about 6 years ago for another woman. Apparently, it was a pretty messy divorce. Ever since then, she's had this thing about military families. She sees them, and something just switches in her head. That explained why she'd gone after Jennifer so viciously. The service dog, the PTSD, the veteran status. It all triggered something dark in Karen. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was punishing Jennifer for reminding her of her failed marriage. It was sick. It was twisted, and it was about to end. I also discovered that Karen had been on thin ice with the HOA board for months. Several board members had received complaints about her behavior, but Karen had always managed to deflect them. She'd claim the complainants were troublemakers, or she'd produce some obscure rule that technically justified her actions, or she'd turn on the tears and play the victim. But the board had been growing increasingly uncomfortable. They just needed someone to step forward with enough evidence to make action unavoidable. I was about to give them exactly that. I spent the next month building a legal case that would make my military prosecutors proud. First, I filed a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on disability, race, national origin, and familial status. Karen had violated all of these. I documented every instance where Karen had denied reasonable accommodations for Marcus's disability, harassed Jennifer over her service animal, targeted racial minorities with excessive fines, enforced rules differently based on race and disability. I included sworn statements from 23 families, supporting documentation, and a comprehensive timeline showing Karen's pattern of discrimination. HUD opened an investigation within 2 weeks. Second, I filed a complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding HOA abuse and potential fraud. I discovered that Karen had been collecting fines that were never properly deposited into the HOA account. Where was that money going? Third, I filed a lawsuit in civil court on behalf of my family, seeking refund of all improper fines, compensation for emotional distress, punitive damages for civil rights violations, injunctive relief preventing further harassment, but I saved the best for last. I contacted every family Karen had targeted and offered to represent them pro bono. With my JAG Corps background, I was licensed to practice law in this state, and I was going to use every skill I'd learned in 30 years to destroy Karen Patterson's reign of terror. 18 families joined my class action lawsuit. The HOA board suddenly became very interested in Karen's activities. When they reviewed her enforcement records, they were shocked. The board hadn't approved most of her actions. She'd been acting independently, using HOA authority she didn't actually have. The board president, a retired accountant named Michael Stevens, called me personally. "Colonel Morrison, I want you to know that the board had no idea the extent of Karen's actions. We trusted her to handle routine enforcement, but this—" He paused, clearly struggling with what to say. "This is unconscionable. We're suspending her immediately and conducting our own investigation." "I appreciate that, Mr. Stevens, But with respect, the board should have been paying attention. You gave her unchecked authority for years. You're absolutely right. That's on us. We're implementing new oversight procedures immediately. And, Colonel Morrison, whatever you need from us to support your case, you've got it. Full cooperation. Karen Patterson does not represent this community or this board. They immediately suspended her as president pending investigation. Karen was furious. She showed up at the next board meeting, which I attended as a concerned homeowner, and tried to address the board. The scene was both pathetic and infuriating. "You're all turning on me after everything I've done for this community," Karen shrieked, her careful composure finally cracking. "I've dedicated 4 years to keeping property values high, enforcing standards, and maintaining order, and this is how you repay me?" "Karen, you've been targeting specific families based on race and disability," Michael Stevens said firmly. "We have documentation. We have testimony. You've been embezzling HOA funds. This isn't about betrayal. This is about accountability." "Those families are lying. They're conspiring against me because they don't want to follow the rules." 23 families, Karen? All lying? All conspiring? Or is it possible that you've been abusing your authority? Karen's face turned red with rage. She pointed at me in the back of the room. "This is all because of him. He's a troublemaker. He's been poisoning everyone against me since he moved in." Every head in the room turned to look at me. I stood up calmly. "Mrs. Patterson, I didn't move to this community to cause trouble. I moved here to give my disabled son a safe place to play and my wife a peaceful place to heal from combat trauma. You made that impossible. Everything that's happening to you now is a direct result of your own choices, your own actions, and your own cruelty." The room erupted in applause from the other homeowners present. Karen looked around wildly, realizing she'd lost whatever support she thought she had. She hired an expensive lawyer and filed countersuits claiming we were harassing her, defaming her, and conducting a conspiracy to remove her from her rightful position. Her lawyer was good, but I was better. And I had something Karen didn't have, the absolute truth on my side. The hearing was scheduled for early February, 3 months after Marcus's ruined birthday party. I arrived early and sat in the back row, baseball cap pulled low, observing. I wanted to see Karen's confidence. I wanted to watch her think she was going to win. Jennifer and Marcus sat in the front row. Jennifer's lawyer, a sharp civil rights attorney named Rebecca Kim, beside them. I'd briefed Rebecca on everything, but we'd decided I would appear as a witness rather than attorney of record to avoid any conflicts. Karen arrived exactly on time, her expensive lawyer in tow. She wore another designer suit, her hair perfect, her expression smug. She truly believed she was going to win. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Robert Harrison entered, a retired military judge who'd gone into civil law. I knew him from my JAG Corps days. He knew me too. This was going to be interesting. "We're here for Morrison versus Meadowbrook HOA and Patterson," Judge Harrison announced. "Ms. Kim, your opening statement." Rebecca stood, professional and precise. "Your Honor, this case is about power, abuse, and discrimination. The defendant, Karen Patterson, used her position as HOA president to systematically target vulnerable families, including disabled veterans, minorities, and children with disabilities. Over 18 months, Ms. Patterson issued 127 violations to just 19 families, all of whom were minorities, disabled, or veterans. Meanwhile, 83 other families in the same HOA received 0 violations during the same period. Karen's expression never changed. That same self-righteous smugness remained. Ms. Patterson denied reasonable accommodations for a disabled child. She harassed a veteran with PTSD over her service animal. She ruined a 12-year-old's birthday party, and she did all of this while embezzling HOA funds for personal use. That got Karen's attention. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. "We're here today to ensure Ms. Patterson faces consequences, that these families receive justice, and that no one else suffers as the Morrison family has suffered." Karen's lawyer gave his opening statement. It was predictable. Karen was a dedicated volunteer, enforcing rules fairly, protecting property values. Any perception of discrimination was unfortunate, but unfounded. Rebecca called Jennifer to testify first. My wife wheeled Marcus up beside her at the witness stand. Bailey sat quietly at her feet. Jennifer's hands trembled as she was sworn in, but her voice was steady. Mrs. Morrison, can you tell the court about your first interaction with the defendant? Jennifer described Karen's arrival, the immediate fines, and the escalating harassment. When she got to the part about Bailey, her voice cracked. Bailey isn't just a pet. She's the reason I can leave my house. She's the reason I can go to the grocery store without having a panic attack. She's the reason I can be a mother to my son. And Karen tried to take her away. What impact did Ms. Patterson's actions have on your family? We went from being excited about our new home to being terrified every time we saw her car in our driveway. My son stopped playing outside because he was afraid of being too loud. I had to increase my anxiety medication. My husband, who survived 30 years in the military, including combat deployments, was stressed to the point of insomnia. Karen Patterson made us feel like criminals in our own home, Marcus testified next. At 12 years old, he was nervous but brave. She made me feel like I was a problem, Marcus said quietly. Like my wheelchair was an inconvenience. Like me, being happy was annoying. I started wishing I could just be normal so we wouldn't get in trouble anymore. I watched Karen's face during Marcus's testimony. She showed no emotion, no remorse, no recognition of the pain she'd caused a child. Rebecca called 10 other families to testify. Each story was heartbreaking. Each story showed Karen's pattern of cruelty. Then Rebecca dropped her bombshell. Your Honor, I'd like to call our final witness, someone with extensive experience in military law, civil rights, and HOA regulations. I call Colonel James Morrison, retired. The courtroom stirred. Karen's head snapped up, looking around frantically. I stood up in the back row, removed my sunglasses and baseball cap, and walked down the center aisle in my full-dress uniform. I'd earned the right to wear it one last time. The moment Karen saw me, really saw me for the first time, all color drained from her face. Her lawyer looked equally shocked. Judge Harrison smiled slightly. Colonel Morrison, it's been a long time. Your Honor, I said, nodding respectfully. Good to see you again, sir. I was sworn in and took my seat at the witness stand. Please state your name and background for the record, Rebecca said. Colonel James Morrison, United States Army, retired. I served 30 years in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, specializing in military law, court-martial proceedings, and civil rights cases. I prosecuted over 200 cases during my career and provided legal counsel on thousands more. Karen looked like she might be sick. And what is your relationship to the plaintiffs? Jennifer Morrison is my wife. Marcus Morrison is my son. Colonel Morrison, in your professional capacity, have you reviewed this case? I have, extensively. I've reviewed every violation notice, every fine, every denial of accommodation. I've interviewed 23 families affected by Ms. Patterson's actions, and I've analyzed the enforcement patterns over the past 18 months. What did you find? Systematic discrimination. Ms. Patterson targeted 19 families, all of whom were minorities, disabled, veterans, or some combination thereof. She issued 127 violations to these families. Meanwhile, 83 other families, predominantly white, able-bodied, with no military service, received 0 violations. I pulled out a comprehensive chart I'd created. This graph shows violation distribution by demographic. The statistical probability of this occurring randomly is less than 0.01%. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Karen's lawyer objected, but Judge Harrison overruled him. I want to see this. Continue, Colonel. Ms. Patterson denied reasonable accommodations required by federal law. She harassed a veteran with a documented disability over her service animal. She attempted to remove accessibility equipment from a disabled child. She disrupted a child's birthday party, and our investigation discovered she had been embezzling HOA funds, over $47,000 over 2 years. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison called for order. How did you discover the embezzlement? As part of our lawsuit discovery, we subpoenaed HOA financial records. Ms. Patterson had been collecting fines, many of which were improper or excessive, and depositing them into a personal account rather than the HOA operating account. She created a separate checking account using the HOA's name but with only her signature authority. Karen's lawyer was frantically whispering to her. She looked panicked now, all smugness gone. Colonel Morrison, in your professional opinion, what was Ms. Patterson's motivation? Power and prejudice. She targeted people she perceived as weak, people she thought wouldn't fight back. Veterans, disabled individuals, minorities. She assumed we would be too busy dealing with our own challenges to challenge her authority. I looked directly at Karen. She was wrong. Rebecca continued her questioning, allowing me to detail every aspect of the investigation. By the time I finished, Karen looked like she wanted to disappear. Her lawyer declined to cross-examine me. Smart move. Judge Harrison called for closing arguments. Rebecca was powerful and precise. Karen's lawyer was defeated before he began. I'll issue my ruling after a brief recess, Judge Harrison announced. The recess lasted 45 minutes. I sat with Jennifer and Marcus holding my son's hand. Dad, you were awesome, Marcus whispered. You're like a superhero. No, buddy. The real heroes are you and Mom for surviving Karen's harassment and still being willing to fight. That takes real courage. When the court reconvened, Judge Harrison looked grim. I've reviewed all evidence, testimony, and applicable law. This is one of the clearest cases of discrimination and abuse of authority I've encountered. He looked directly at Karen. Ms. Patterson, stand up. Karen stood, her lawyer beside her. Your actions were reprehensible. You systematically targeted vulnerable families because of their race, disability, and military service. You denied accommodations required by federal law. You harassed a 12-year-old child with cerebral palsy. You attempted to separate a veteran from her service animal. And you embezzled money from the very community you were supposed to serve. Judge Harrison's voice grew harder. I find in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts. You are hereby ordered to pay $125,000 in compensatory damages to the Morrison family, $250,000 in punitive damages, full refund of all improper fines to all affected families, payment of all legal fees, restitution of $47,000 in embezzled funds. You are permanently barred from holding any HOA position anywhere in this state. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution on embezzlement charges. Karen tried to speak, but Judge Harrison cut her off. I'm not finished. Ms. Patterson, you represent everything wrong with HOA leadership. You weaponized minor rules to torment people who had already sacrificed and suffered. You targeted a combat veteran who served this country. You targeted a disabled child. You showed no mercy, no compassion, no humanity. The judge looked at Marcus. Young man, I want you to know something. You have every right to laugh, play, and be happy in your own yard. Your wheelchair doesn't make you less valuable. Your disability doesn't make you a problem. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. Judge Harrison looked back at Karen. Ms. Morrison, your family showed incredible courage in fighting back. This verdict is not just for you, but for every family who suffers under petty tyrants like Ms. Patterson. The gavel came down with finality. This court is adjourned. The story exploded across local and national news. HOA Karen targets disabled veteran's family, gets destroyed by JAG Corps colonel, became a viral headline. Within days, Karen was charged criminally with embezzlement. She eventually pleaded guilty and received 18 months in prison plus 5 years probation. The HOA board was completely restructured. They implemented anti-discrimination policies, created an appeals process for violations, and established oversight for HOA president actions. 18 families received justice and compensation. But the real victory was watching Marcus return to his old self. 2 weeks after the trial, I found him in the backyard, laughing loudly while playing with his friends. The joyful, unreserved laughter of a child who felt safe in his own home. Jennifer stood beside me, Bailey at her side, tears of happiness in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," I corrected. "You survived. You testified. You refused to let her break you. That's real courage." Today, Marcus is 15 and thriving. He's in advanced classes, has a great group of friends, and advocates for disability rights at his school. Jennifer is doing well. Her PTSD is managed, and she volunteers with veteran support organizations, helping other veterans navigate housing discrimination. I've returned to practicing law part-time, specializing in HOA abuse cases. I've helped 43 families fight back against discriminatory HOA leadership. Karen Patterson served her prison sentence in silence. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no remorse. But it doesn't matter. She's irrelevant now. What matters is that Marcus laughs freely in his yard. Jennifer feels safe in her home, and 19 families learned that bullies in positions of power can be defeated. The Meadowbrook HOA was completely transformed after Karen's removal. The new president, Maria Chen, one of the family's Karen, had implemented compassionate leadership that actually serves the community. Violations are now handled with warnings and assistance first, not immediate fines. Accommodations for disabilities are approved promptly, and every board decision requires majority approval. No single person has unchecked authority. Last summer, the HOA hosted a community barbecue. Families who had been afraid to even speak to each other under Karen's reign were laughing, sharing food, and building genuine friendships. Marcus played basketball with 6 other kids, his wheelchair no barrier to his joy. Bailey rested peacefully beside Jennifer, no longer on alert for threats. And I stood there, watching my family finally experience the peace we'd moved here to find, and I realized something profound. Karen Patterson thought she could break us because she saw weakness. She saw a disabled child, a veteran with PTSD, and a retired soldier trying to adjust to civilian life. She saw targets, not people. But she missed the most important truth. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Needing help isn't a weakness. Having disabilities isn't a weakness. Real weakness is using power to hurt others. Real weakness is targeting children. Real weakness is being so bitter about your own life that you try to destroy everyone else's happiness. Marcus rolled up to me, grinning. "Dad, Mrs. Chen said I could help plan next year's community events. She wants my input on making everything accessible for everyone. Isn't that cool?" "That's very cool, buddy. You're going to be great at it." "Karen never would have let me help with anything," he said thoughtfully. "She made me feel like I was a problem to be solved. Mrs. Chen makes me feel like I have good ideas worth hearing." "You do have good ideas. You always did. Karen was just too small-minded to see it." Jennifer joined us, Bailey at her side. "You know what I realized today? This is the first community event I've been to in 2 years, where I didn't have a panic attack. No anxiety, no fear, just peace." I put my arm around her. "That's what home is supposed to feel like." She leaned into me. "Thank you for fighting for us. I know I told you I needed to handle it myself at first, but I was wrong. Sometimes fighting back means knowing when to let the people who love you help carry the weight." "We carried it together," I said. "That's what families do." Later that evening, after Marcus was asleep, I sat on our back porch and thought about everything we'd been through. The harassment, the fights, the courtroom drama, the victory. And I thought about Karen Patterson sitting in her prison cell, probably still convinced she'd done nothing wrong. Some people never learn. Some people never change. Some people go to their graves believing they were the victim, even when they were clearly the villain. But that's not my problem anymore. Karen Patterson is facing the consequences of her choices. She lost her position, her reputation, her freedom, and a substantial amount of money. She did that to herself. My job now is to make sure other families don't have to fight the same battle alone. The phone on the table beside me buzzed. An email from a family in another state who'd found my information online. They were being targeted by their HOA president for having an autistic son who disrupted the neighborhood peace by stimming in his own backyard. I picked up the phone and started typing a response. I'd be happy to help. Here's what you need to do first. Because that's what Karen Patterson never understood. When you hurt people, especially vulnerable people, you don't just hurt them. You create advocates. You create fighters. You create an army of people who will make sure your type of cruelty never goes unchallenged again. Karen Patterson thought she had all the power in the world. She was wrong. The real power was always in the hands of the people she tried to break. We just had to learn how to use it. And now we're teaching others to do the same. Karen Patterson made one fatal error. She targeted a veteran family who knew how to fight. And we fought with everything we had. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. And remember, you are not powerless. You are not alone. And justice is always worth fighting for.